Well, hello there. It is great to see you again, and welcome back to another installment of Wisdom and Wealth Pathways to a Life of Significance for You and Your Family. I am your host and moderator, Ryan Ruff, and as always, we have the star of our show, Mr. Frank Astorino of the Astorino Financial Group. He'll be joining us momentarily for another wealth management related discussion because, hey, that's what we do here on the show. Frank and I have covered a handful of great topics and strategies, solutions, you name it, on some past episodes. And today we're getting into a really good one today. I'm excited about it. Really, we're making you look inward today and ask yourselves, are your heirs ready to deal with the wealth that you may pass on to them one day? You see, everybody is probably familiar with this process of passing, their wealth or their assets, their livelihood really, onto their heir. But what I think a lot of people overlook in this process are some of maybe the conflicts and challenges that can arise during this process. Of course, an inheritance, it can be a life-changing event overnight for an heir or heirs. But again, it always comes with a little bit of baggage. And that's what we're going to be diving into today and why it really is a process that needs to happen of preparing those heirs for an inheritance. So that being said, let's go ahead and bring Frank on and get right into today's conversation. Frank, how are you doing this morning? Good to see you.
Great, Ryan. It's good to see you again. I can't believe we're already heading into spring. It's gone by real quickly this year so far.
Absolutely. Here we are sitting down recording another episode, Frank. It's the years flying by to say the least. Frank, we're talking about preparing heirs for their inheritances today. And when we think about passing inheritances on, most of the time, everybody's, viewpoint shift to, it's smoothing the path of life out for the heir that's going to be receiving that inheritances. But Frank, you're a believer that inheritances themselves can be a little bit of a double-edged sword these days. Why is it that you feel that way?
Oh, it's a really interesting and powerful topic today. We anticipate trillions of dollars changing hands over the next 30 years from one generation to another. And it's also been a main topic among many of our clients as parents of children. They're concerned about the future socially and politically and economically. And our industry hasn't really been able to address the next generation as efficiently as we'd like. And it's an important topic because inheriting wealth is different to those who are natives of wealth, which we are the children who grew up with wealth, and the immigrants of wealth, which are the creators, the founders of that wealth. So a lot of the younger generation or the next generation inheriting for the first time this plethora of wealth, they're thinking about, a lot of them are thinking about paying for life's necessities and enjoying the advantages of being affluent and more spending on luxury goods, affording top tier education for their kids, where they're going to live. So with that comes a kind of a mystery about where the wealth came from. And it's not so worry free. There's a lot of internal and external conflicts and challenges that can arise.
So Frank, in that vein, I want to get into what some of those conflicts you mentioned, internal and external conflicts that heirs can be dealing with. What are we talking about exactly?
Well, Ryan, that's one of the reasons our firm, we not only retain a local therapist, we have behavioral finance experts in the country, and we also have a major hospital and director of psychiatrics for even some of our seniors who are going through changes of life and having to deal with some of these complex issues. But when it comes to the wealth side and inheriting, it can be very confusing to those inheriting it. Significant wealth goes hand in hand with status and power, what they see on TV, on the red carpet, which sometimes leads them to abusing their positions or having kind of this self entitlement and or narcissistic even. So when we see that, the parents usually are somewhat concerned of how do I set this up so that our kids aren't spending in 10 years what took generations to build. So we have to be very careful and walk a fine line with the internal struggle of the heirs and the concerns and frustrations and the complexities that the parents, particularly even in blended families, we see a lot of disparity in wealth. When they're merged together, it brings a host of complex issues. So we try to put a big emphasis on the qualitative aspect of wealth and the transference of it.
Frank, I mean, just given the complex nature that you've laid out in front of us with these internal and external conflicts that can pop up, all the variables at play here, it can be a little daunting. I think we've now laid that out to our audience. So where do you start, Frank? How do you help and start addressing these issues and ultimately helping heirs in the first place?
I would start with the present. I think that, being a parent myself, we start by observing where each of our children are in maturity and acumen for finance. And we start them out early with, looking at what their lifestyle is, trying to uh, help give them feedback, ask the right questions. More importantly, we try to be a model for them so that they can see our participation in work and how hard we work. It's not just an easy no-brainer to have money and make money. We also involve them in leadership, get involved in the community. And very often we involve them in charitable causes so that they can see that there is giving back as part of having wealth.
I love that, Frank. And Frank, you're working with extremely successful families, on a regular basis over at the Astorino Financial Group. What do you see, and what are the types of conversations you're having with these families? What are they doing, or maybe not doing, really, in some cases, when it comes to passing on their wealth?
Well, I think one is that they postpone dealing with it. Sometimes they might have an expressed concern. But when you start dealing with estate planning, it gets into dealing with your mortality. So you have to kind of confront that, and be gentle with it, but also be forthright in letting them know all the different possible solutions there are. We have a big toolbox, but we can't use that toolbox and resources without knowing what some of the problems and dynamics are. So our discovery process starts to open that up. And then, as we have our reviews, we gently reintroduce it and say, where are we at with that?
Beautiful, Frank. When you're going through this process of working with, younger generations, trying to educate them, where do you begin then to start fostering that level of financial intelligence among the heirs and get them, to start really getting them ready for that day that they're going to inherit wealth? I guess the key bit in that question for you there is, where do you begin starting to foster that level of financial intelligence?
It varies from family to family and individuals. I use some teaching moments to certainly with the younger generation. It could be talking about how you choose to buy a cup of coffee. Do you go to the local Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks and pay a few dollars for a cup of coffee? Do you use a K-cup? Do you use the vendor, that comes around to the building? And when they start to see how much money can slip through their hands, as opposed to doing things like deferring it or deferring the excess, we teach them on, especially when they get their first job, we talk to them about their taxes and do they understand how a deduction works? Do they understand what FICA and SUI is? And when you start to look at the compounding effect of money when saved against what you're going to need in the future, it gets their attention. And I find often that younger people are anxious to start early. As we get older and we deal with our senior clients, they're concerned about their health. They're concerned about how they're going to be taken care of and not depending on their children. But they're also concerned about how are our children going to deal with this wealth when they get it? Because we didn't have it growing up. And now that we do, we want them to benefit from it, not be hurt by it.
Absolutely. And Frank, in that from that same vein, then for a matriarch or patriarch, when you're going through this process, would you say it's probably a good idea then to get a current view on how an heir deals with wealth, or just their overall viewpoint? Get a viewpoint on how they look at wealth, how they spend it themselves. And then once you have an idea of how they already carry themselves when it comes to wealth, that can kind of then inform you on the steps to educate that given heir. Am I correct in saying that? Is that
That's
a reasonable?
absolutely correct. And, it could start with decisions of, buying or leasing a car. It could be, whether go back to school for an advanced degree or to take advantage of the career opportunity for you. Do I go into a retirement plan with my employer? Do I go Roth IRA versus traditional, 401k? These are the types of questions that the young affluent are asking and wanting to make the right decisions, or the ones that are going to be, hopefully game changers for them down the road. Uh, that's where we start, and it's really a where are they in their maturity? There are many businesses. If you look at this country, most of consumer sentiment is made up of our business owners and family-owned businesses. And if that represents a lot of the economy, it's really important that we parents and baby boomers and senior uh, creators of wealth do a good job of being a steward for this next generation. Otherwise, we're all going to be in trouble. They can't think that it's a free lunch.
Mm-hmm.
So we do our best to educate them through seminars, podcasts. Actually, what we're doing here today, Ryan, is part of the effort to give back and to pay it forward and to reach a larger population to know what's going on and what they need to know and how to conduct hiring professionals, how to start to think about the future and not just the present.
Mm-hmm. No, you're absolutely right. I'm glad you mentioned that, Frank, because hey, that's what we're doing here on the show. As a message, an aside, if you will, to our audience. I mean, we're bringing the same strategies and conversations that you're having with clients on a regular basis, and we're bringing them right here onto this show for you guys, our audience. Today, it's preparing heirs for their inheritance. Down the road, we've got some other great topics to tackle. But Frank, uh, when I'm looking at, when you look at heirs in general, I mean, let's face it, let's say maybe there's a family business, at the forefront of a given family's overall wealth, and let's say they have a few different heirs. Odds are that maybe, let's say, one of the heirs has more of an interest in the family business, is keen on maybe even taking it over one day. But then on the other side, maybe you've got another heir within this family that has absolutely no interest in pursuing that life. Maybe they're more interested in the fine arts, or pursuing a career that they can call their own. In instances like that, where you've got different heirs, obviously that probably lends itself to different approaches on educating them throughout the process of getting them ready for that inheritance. Would you say then, Frank, maybe there's an approach that to educating heirs that just better resonates, or it's more appealing to potential inheritors?
It's a real challenge close to my heart. I have four children that are very different, and a couple are into finance, and the others are not. There's no perfect script. Every child and person is different, and their biases are sometimes very unconscious, subconscious. Um, but the way I would approach it is to, identify their strengths and who can do what, and also start with like the family constitution, where you're sharing your values, and you start talking about your values at the dinner table, and start answering some of those questions of why. Why do you get involved in public office, or why do you donate so much money to that charity, and things of that nature. Start the conversation to answer the why. um, we start to ask them, what does wealth mean to them? It could be, there could be terrific possibilities with wealth, or there could be horrific problems, or some combination of the two. And we might ask questions about how's wealth affecting your life. One might be interested in buying real estate while the other is interested in, getting into the family business because they see all the benefits of it. And the others may not be interested in that at all, but they want the benefits of it. They want the benefits of that business. So you kind of have to look at, what are they each going to inherit fairly? They may all inherit an equal portion of the wealth, but when it comes to a business or a family business, you have to earn or acquire or purchase or end up owning that business to further your wealth. You can't expect it to just be unbalanced among the family, or you're going to have problems, especially when they get married. And you have to assess each child and their significant other. You may have to involve setting up trusts or prenuptial agreements. Some children might get inter vivos planning, which is during their lifetime, as opposed to waiting till you pass away. A lot of people like to see the benefit of their wealth being distributed during their lifetime and not wait to see what happens.
Sure, sure. Frank, you had mentioned, just this idea of stewardship earlier and how that goes into some of these conversations that a patriarch or matriarch should be having with their. Let's expand a little on this. What else then should a family matriarch or patriarch be thinking about when it comes to preparing their heirs for inheritance by way of stewardship?
Well, there are little side notes that you could employ. Every Thanksgiving, I recite what the top 10 accomplishments were, for the year and what I'm grateful for. And then I look at what are the next 10 top things that I want to accomplish coming into the next year. And then I go around the table and let them each share their own view of what was successful and what they're grateful for. And I try to go even a step further when each of them, a couple have already gotten married, and I tell them to think about 3 victories each day and focus on the victories so that you both have momentum and energy and things to be grateful going into the next day. In short, I'm very interested in passing on a legacy of, time value. Our time is limited. We can't control our time, but we can control our choices. We can control some of the decisions that we make and how do we make those good decisions. And there are trade-offs. We talk about trade-offs with every financial decision or career or personal decision that you have to make. And there's an opportunity cost if, depending on which one you go with. So it's important to kind of lay out the big picture. And when the young people can see what the big picture is and start to have some vision besides the here and now and just the present, it makes for a better foundation for their going forward.
Frank, we've laid out a lot of good stuff for our audience today. A lot of things to consider when it comes to this process of really prepping heirs for that day the inheritance comes, how it's going to change their life, and then, of course, what they can do with that wealth. But one thing I do want to make clear for our audience, and could you elaborate a little bit on this? You don't necessarily need to be inheriting enormous sums of money, enormous amounts of assets for these types of educational efforts from a matriarch and patriarch standpoint to be applicable, in helping the children educate the heirs. I mean, we're talking about this is a universally applicable strategy and concept. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, it is. I've written articles for even those who may be incarcerated that have nothing or are coming out into nothing. And I think the most important starting point is values and attitudes towards money. So when you get foundation in, what does it mean to you, and what would you do and accomplish with the varying different degrees of wealth, it gets them thinking. It gets them thinking about what is money for. It's not just an ATM machine. It's really, something that requires thought, labor, innovation, risk, uh, and opportunity costs. So everyone is unique, and we try to help deliver with each individual personality type and their skill set on how to proceed.
I love that. And So for our audience, regardless of your level of wealth, we've given them given you a lot to consider here today in terms of, preparation steps for educating your heirs, items to consider when going through this process. Frank, my final question for the day is the who. Who should families turn to if they need some assistance and need some help when going through this process of educating heirs and getting them ready for that day the inheritance will fall into their lap?
I think the best starting place is with their existing wealth manager, assuming they have one, if they have one. And usually that comes with a network of attorneys and CPAs and investment mediums. And not everybody's a perfect fit. And we talk about that in the last interview about stress testing. So a stress test or a family meeting could be a good starting place to see um, what the family tree looks like and what the issues and opportunities are, because there are a vast amount of resources available, and sometimes just giving them the roadmap of how to get there. So start with the existing wealth manager that they know.
I love that. Frank, final thing. If anybody out there in the audience today, they've taken something away from the conversation, maybe they're interested in reaching out to you and your team just to talk about their own unique situation and maybe if there's a fit and how you could even assist them in preparing their heirs, for that day the inheritance comes. What would be the best way somebody could reach out to you and your team and just open up a dialogue?
There's no obligation for an initial interview to explore what we do and how we do it, what our, formula for success is, and how we do business. That's an invitation that's out there. So I would call our office, ask for Karen, and Karen will basically set up an appointment. And it could be a 15-minute interview, and it could end up segueing into an hour and a half discovery meeting.
A lot to unpack in the discovery meeting. We had talked about that in a past, episode where we covered stress testing, discovery meeting being a very big part of that overall stress testing process. So be sure to head back, check that out if you're curious on what really the discovery entails. But Frank, look, I appreciate you and your time. Thanks for carving some time out of your day to be with us here on the show to talk about preparing heirs for their inheritance, and looking forward to being back with you on another show.
Look forward to it also, Ryan, and thanks for your time and enjoy working with you, and make it a great day.
Thanks, Frank. Appreciate it. And of course, hey, make it a great day, guys, to you, our audience. Thanks for jumping aboard, being with us here on the show. If you took something away from today's conversation, do us a favor, leave a comment behind for us. Subscribe to the show on whichever platform you're checking us out on. And then, of course, share this information with friends, family, business owners, really anybody that you would think would benefit from these types of conversations. I said it earlier in the show. I'll say it again. We're bringing the same types of strategies, solutions, really conversations that Frank is having with his clients on a regular basis at the Astorino Financial Group. And we're bringing them right here to you on this show. We've got a lot of really, really great topics teed up for you in future episodes to come, and we would hate to have you miss out on any of that potentially beneficial information. So for Frank Astorino, I'm Ryan Ruff. We're going to go ahead and say so long, but we appreciate you jumping aboard with us on today's installment of Wisdom and Wealth.